All right. Happy Monday. Happy, right? Anyway, so today I am rocking Macho Man Randy Savage Deep Thoughts. This was apparently taken after he won the title. It's a absolute favorite. It's this shirt always makes me feel more confident, more in control of my surroundings, more myself. Anyway, so you know, I usually, when going into the first paper, like to introduce a few grammatical concepts to kind of like help ground the writing and some basic tasks. But for you guys, for this first assignment, I think we're actually going to relax a little bit on that, which kind of runs counter to what I usually do because this being a summer class, we don't have as much time. But I don't know. There's something to be said about kind of taking a little bit of a less high impact approach with the first assignment. So anyway, last week we wrote a quick 5 sentence discussion about the things in our life that oppress us. And of course, we opened up that oppression can be anything that is frustrating to achieving one's goals, limiting one's freedom, becoming more human in general, right? We could talk about oppression in terms that don't necessarily have to be so overly emotional. These can be regular, ordinary things, and they can definitely be things that, we accept or we choose for ourselves. Now, we're going to shoot for 2 pages for this paper. And the due date, I hate to be this aggressive, but again, we got to move. I'd like a draft of this thing submitted by Thursday at 5 o'clock. Now, that gives us the week, right? And we'll talk a little bit on Wednesday. We'll have our first team session on Wednesday. I need to go back and check my schedule and see exactly when the team session will go live. I've already had a few of you contact me wanting to try to set up some other times in order to do those team sessions. But we'll have one more video to kind of like, review some of the things. But so the main thing that we probably need to talk about, and so much of teaching writing always has a tendency to revolve around expansion. Because especially with the basic skills in 1010, students often struggle to produce a lot of content for their writing. And the question I get asked over and over again is, how do I fill up this page requirement? This is 2 pages. So this one is very much easy on the scale of, length, because we'll go up to 3 pages, then 4 pages. When we're in the research paper, we're going to try to shoot for 6. So that is going to get more challenging as we move ahead. But for now, I want to address what is the most common problem for these writing classes. This isn't just for basic skills either. This happens in the 1101 class. I have so much students who struggle with this. I get lots and lots of papers where students have basically written a single block. And that single block of text is an absolute nightmare to grade. If you give me 2 pages where there's no division and no spacing in paragraphs, that is going to hurt your grade. And it's going to hurt the grade because it more so, one of the things I want you guys to walk away from this class with is the idea that one of the most important things about your writing is not necessarily quote unquote correctness. It's readability. You want to communicate. That's the whole point of writing, right? Is to get the ideas in your head and transfer them somewhere else. So when we talk about things like grammar, where the goal of it is to make your writing more accessible. There's a lot of grammar rules out there that teachers obsess over that really don't necessarily interfere with the readability of a paper. We'll talk about that next week when we get a little bit further in. There's a lot of really strange kind of remote odd pronoun rules, like who versus whom. It's very rare for someone to use who or whom incorrectly and not adequately communicate. In fact, most of the time, if you're using whom in spoken language, you're getting it wrong, or you're being so unbelievably formal that it's strange for other people to hear whom used correctly. Now, I'll explain how to use it correctly and what it means, but we're not worrying about that right now. There's a lot of examples of that where correctness in your grammar can actually be detrimental to your ability to communicate. Because, like, we don't necessarily freak out so much about absolute correctness as much as we should freak out about the ability of people to understand what on earth we're trying to say. And this is a consistent problem. So for this first piece, we're going to relax a bit. But really, one of the big things I want you guys to consider is paragraphing, because it's really hard to get an A on a paper in my class. In fact, no, I'm going to take that back. It's impossible to get an A on a paper in my class if you do not have good paragraphing. If you've got a single block of text, you'll be lucky to get a C. I hate to be that forward, but it really does just break your legs. It takes all of the energy out of your writing and turns your writing into a slog. So let's talk about the paragraph. One, in terms of what it should how it should behave and what it should look like, and two, how it can help you write the paper. I know there's probably a few of you out there who are kind of maybe rolling your eyes right now, like, we're talking about paragraphs. Believe me, there are people who need it. Okay. And when we talk about paragraphing, it's a good kind of review to think about how we structure our essay as well. Because most of the time, and I'm going to say this till I'm blue in the face, students don't necessarily plan what they're going to do before they do it, right? For the most part, students just kind of sort of sit down the night before something is due and hammer it out and submit it. Now, a lot of English teachers get mad about that. That's like, you're not going through the proper process. And yes, I want you to go through the process as well. But I mean, I'm 38. Ew. But I just turned 38 like Thursday. But I still remember writing papers the night before they were due. So like, I can't hate on you too much for that, because, I did it too, especially, believe it or not. When you write as much as I did in grad school, you end up writing like you actually get to a point where you can actually kind of write an acceptable paper in a shockingly small amount of time. But the thing is with that, I've been writing at the college level for 6 years at that point, right? I'd been doing it for forever. And so I was just kind of naturally good at it. And if I'd gone through the proper process of writing my papers, what I'm teaching you now, my papers would have been better, right? So anyway, that's not advice. Ultimately, teaching you this process stuff is going to help you get through this with a little bit less anxiety. So let's talk about paragraphs. Enough about my stupid antics in grad school. So how long should a paragraph be? And of course, you guys know a paragraph is indented. You can do the indentation by hitting tab on your keyboard as you're writing. So each time you have a new paragraph, you're going to have that little space over, right? And when you leave a paragraph, you hit enter. Again, rudimentary stuff, but you'd be surprised how many people need to kind of be reminded of this, because I get so many submissions of single block texts, right? I'm basing this off of what I typically get for the first paper. So I'm trying to get in front of this problem a little. So how long should a paragraph typically be? I've got a beginning answer and an end answer for this class. Most of my students that I talk to in high school, and even the ones who've been out for a while when I do this review process, because I try to talk to my students, oh, what do you know? Where are you? Most of my students respond with like 5-sentence paragraphs, typically are what they go for, 5-sentence paragraphs. And again, thing is, I remember kind of doing that as well. But I remember being taught 5-sentence paragraphs kind of in elementary school. But when I was in high school, here I go talking about my damn self again. When I was in high school, it kind of just sort of like backed off of it, right? They didn't really talk to us about the actual process of writing anymore as we got, up through the grades. But in all honesty, this 5-sentence paragraph idea is hugely problematic for several reasons. One, a 5-sentence paragraph is extremely rudimentary. You're really not going to be able to accomplish much with a 5-sentence paragraph. It just doesn't have the space to really have much development. It's really hard to prove a point within 5 sentences. It's very, very tight. So really, and this is probably one of the big reasons my students struggle to fill even 2 to 3 pages sometimes. When you've got such small little paragraph units that are trying to accomplish little small goals, that means you have to come up with a lot of small goals in order to fill up the paper. You have to talk about a lot of different stuff because you just can't seem to really carry an idea to any real fruit, right? You're moving, you switch to a new thought like so fast. So basically, if you want to start getting longer papers, if you want to start hammering out the pages, my advice is actually to learn to shoot for 10. Now, 10 sentences in a paragraph for students who are either coming out of high school or have been out of school for a long time, that's kind of overwhelming. That's a lot to ask for a student who's just coming back into the academic sphere. And high school students often, their brains get a little fried trying to go that far themselves. So, in all honesty, don't panic if you're coming in at the 6 to 7 sentence mark. It'll take time for you to learn to draw out ideas that detailed. It'll come because honestly, you really want your paragraphs to be nice, fully developed units of thought. Like you want to really hyper individualize your paragraphs. They need to have some type of goal in mind. They need to be doing something specifically within the wider scope of what your paper is exploring. As you write more and more and more, and I'm assuming that you guys are going to write, out of class, because of course you will, because I make it so fun. You're just going to be like, you know what? I'm going to write a paper, even though I have no requirement to do so. Yeah, I know, right? In any case, so the more you write, the easier this becomes. So by the end of the semester, one of the things I want to see from you guys, I want you to start hitting 10-sentence paragraphs. If you can do that, that 5-6 page paper all of a sudden gets a lot easier. Because you're dealing with stronger mental units that are coming to like reassemble in the page, right? So let's do this then. With the oppression paper, if you're going to write in paragraphs, you have to kind of think about the individual like units, the individual themes that you want to bring to the paper in order for it to kind of assemble, right? So if we're talking about things that oppress us, one of the first pieces of advice I would give you would be try to get to one element in your life that is oppressive. Try to identify one thing to primarily talk about, as opposed to just listing off a bunch of stuff that you find oppressive. If you need to go that route, you can. But a good paper is going to focus on one or two, and it's really going to drag out that one thing. Right. So, and this seems counterintuitive for most students. If I'm trying to fill pages, why would I limit myself in what I'm talking about? It's counterintuitive, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So if you're listing a whole bunch of stuff, you got 2 pages to do it. You're really not going to be able to talk about any of those things in detail. You're going to they're going to fight each other in the paper for attention. You'll constantly be moving on, constantly moving, and you'll kind of get exhausted doing that. It's not a good use of your subject and your ideas. You want your ideas to do the work for you, right? As opposed to just throwing out ideas. It's harder to generate lots and lots and lots of ideas than it is to get material from those ideas. But a lot of students have to really practice this. So let me model this for you for a minute. And I'm going to do this myself because, again, I really try to show you guys I'm not going to do things that I'm not going to ask you to do things that I'm not willing to do myself. And I already talked about it a little bit. Let's talk about my attention deficit disorder. I have ADHD. Shocker, right? So anyway, if I'm going to talk about my ADHD and how oppressive it is, I would attack it from like 2 or 3 different directions for 2 pages. So what I would probably do, and you don't have to do this, but if you want to copy what I'm doing, go ahead and take out a piece of paper and kind of think about my outline, right? You can steal this from me. What I would do first is I might talk about being a child with ADHD. I remember that, right? I remember being in a specific classroom. I remember really having trouble paying attention specifically to long division. I could not put those pieces together. It just went completely over my head, and it felt painful to talk about long division. There's so many other interesting things that I wanted to do that to devote time to long division felt like I was pulling my teeth out. And my teacher got really angry at me about it. She got angry at me about my bad grades, and she made fun of me, right? She made fun of me to other teachers and to other students about how like far behind I was and how I'm not doing myself any favors. And so like I'm getting a little emotional here. I hate third grade teachers in any case. So this was something that I kind of carried with me. I always had the assumption that I was very, very bad at math. So what I might do with my paper is start with a specific memory of something that I was struggling with when I was young that directly related to my ADHD. I would devote a whole paragraph to that memory. And I could really tease that out with very specific details of the memory. Her ugly hair, the ridiculous drawings she had hanging up on the walls, the bird that was flying around outside that looked like it was going to run into the window, right? Again, I'm a writer, so I don't necessarily expect you guys to operate at this level, but I have fun with my images. And I try to load my writing up with just weird, strange, random stuff that eventually kind of connects. Again, not expecting you to do that. I'm just trying to show you that, this doesn't necessarily have to be, I feel oppressed. I feel oppressed by my constant allergies. My allergies. No, you can do stuff with this. You can play with this. So I would start with the memory and I would really delve into the perceptions and the details of that memory. From there, I would probably go into young adulthood. Unlike a lot of my peers, my ADHD was not treated. It was never caught. I wasn't diagnosed till I was an adult. And it was never caught because I was very high functioning, right? I was able to eventually pass math, but it took everything I had to get through it. And I failed 8th grade algebra. So again, it's still kind of, I didn't realize I was still as upset about this as I am, but it was a struggle. I would go into those struggles. I would go into the fact, I would say how I overcame them. And those specific memories, teachers, graduating high school. When I was an adult, I was diagnosed, and my psychologist was like, your teenage years must have been brutal because you had this thing, you figured out how to manage it yourself, but that had to take so much effort, and it must have caused you so much anxiety. And he was like, it actually really upsets me knowing that as a kid you went through this. And I was just imagining at that moment, I know I shouldn't be violent, but I just really wanted to smack my 3rd grade teacher. Oh, I'm kind of glad she's not around anymore. Anyway, the diagnosis of my ADHD didn't come till I had my brief stay at the mental hospital. So what I'm doing here, I am really dragging this out, right? ADHD, early years, high school years, diagnosis as an adult. Now, where would I potentially go from here? I would probably at that point shift to today and what I do to manage it today. I'm still not medicated for it. I probably could use some, but I have a lot of strategies that I use, and it's still something I struggle with. Sometimes I miss deadlines. My wife asks me to do something and right completely over my head. She's like, why don't you put your license plate tag on your car? And I'm like, ADHD. That's my excuse for everything. She's like, why did you buy that $80 Lego set? ADHD. It doesn't always work. But there's a lot of strategies that I use to try to cope with it. So that would be what I would end with, is like my adulthood, how I cope with it. And I would also, and this is something I would encourage you guys to do, I would try to connect it and say, well, in some ways it's made me stronger. It's made me stronger because when I really devote myself to something, ADHD makes you extremely powerful in certain subjects because it's something that directly engages you. And you become a little bit of a monster when you have a hold of something that you really, really like. So when you are, really connected to something, you really kind of go crazy with it. And for me, one of the things I figured out when I was a teenager was I could just read and read and read and read, and not just read, but talk about and think about and explore. And that's why I went to college for literature and writing, right? Because I knew if I had that in my life, if that was the central focus of my life, I would always have this deep well of energy and connection to work with, because I've got so much engagement and so much energy with the topic of writing and literature that I was like, if I can make that the focus of my life, I'll be able to just really engage. So that was kind of like one of the strategies I had, that I knew I've got to do something with this because there's just near limitless energy, right? So in a way, the oppressive thing became something that I leveraged for my own benefit. The oppression became something that, eventually would lead to a strength later on, because it was something I understood about myself. Not all oppressive stuff can be worked in that context, but I don't know, maybe. I'm trying to think of something just absolutely awful. Like, I don't know, like cancer. If anybody, I've had several family members pass away from cancer. I've had people in my life struggle with cancer. And one of the things that I've seen is the patience, the understanding of the value of life. That is something that does kind of visit a lot of those people. There's a lot of ways that stuff that oppresses you can make you maybe not necessarily stronger. I'm not a big fan of the old phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Sometimes what doesn't kill you leaves you broken and battered, at least for a while. But it can make you smarter, and it can make you wiser, and it can give you experience that someone might be able to use later. So again, remember, this is a sample outline of how I would organize my paragraphs: childhood, high school, adulthood, and then kind of an assessment of the strength that I got from it, right? That's how I would attack this paper. And for me, it would be very hard for me to keep this under 5 pages, right? But that's me. That's not you. You guys don't have to be like me. This is 2 pages. So you hit that second page, for God's sake, stop, right? I don't want you to torture yourself for no reason. So the main thing I want you guys to understand is this doesn't have to be perfect. This is our first assignment. I don't expect anything to be perfect from you guys. But the main thing I want you to just really focus on for this writing is to really think about what your paragraphs are going to do. Your paragraphs are extremely important. So keep that in mind. I'm going to open the Dropbox today. I'm going to tack on the rubric to it. And we're going to go from there. And we'll talk again on Wednesday. I don't know about what. I'll plan something. I always do. Yeah, I think that's it for today. This was fun. I really enjoyed this. One last look at old Randy Savage here. Just, isn't it great? You guys have a lovely Monday, and we'll talk soon.